Hello, crafty friends, and welcome back to my channel. Well, sometimes having a card that says I'm sorry is exactly what you need, whether it's for someone who's going through a very difficult time or just a way to apologize to someone. I'm going to share a very clean and simple card project that do both these things, featuring the I'm sorry wafer die from the latest to be loved release, paired with a beautiful floral focal point and an embossed background. Well, before we get started, I would really appreciate if you could take a minute to subscribe to my channel. Your love really means a lot to me. Let us take a look at the products that I'll be using today. I have the I'm Sorry Wafer Die, which is from the latest To Be Loved release. And for my focal point, I will be using the Exotic Blooms Wafer Die, which is this beautiful floral image from a previous release, which was called To Love. Now, there are many products from both these releases which can be coordinated together to create beautiful card fronts and for other projects too. I will have links to both of these releases down in the description box below. Okay, so off camera, I went and die cut all of the floral images using some white cardstock. Now, whenever I'm having small, delicate die cut pieces, I like to use heavyweight cardstocks. Here I'm using the Nina 110 pound white color cardstock. So, well, you could also use colored cardstocks if you need, but I planned on ink blending on these. To add color to these flowers, I placed them over the Simon System sticky mat, which will hold all of these tiny little pieces in place while I ink blend on them using my Simon System positively saturated inks. I kept the colors very fairly simple. I have my favorite combination of greens, which is pine and field for the leaves. I use the ocean shade, which is this beautiful teal color for the flower, and yellow citrine for the center stamen. Once I was done with all of the ink blending, I gently peeled off all of these pieces from the sticky mat and adhered them together using my liquid barely art glue. I did add a small piece of foam tape between the petals for some extra dimension on my flowers. I used the same exotic blooms die in one of my previous projects where I created a very clean and simple card with this beautiful floral focal point and a die cut sentiment which says adore you. I will leave a link to that video down in the description box below. Now that my focal point is ready, I was debating on whether to place this over a light gray cardstock or a white cardstock. Well, eventually I did use the white cardstock as my card background, but what do you think? Would it go better with the white or with the gray? Let me know in the comments down below. I took an A2 size white panel and cut it down to 4 by 5 and quarter, which is slightly smaller than an A2 size card base. This is something that I do for almost all of my projects where I like to have the slightest border showing up on my card fronts. Next, I went ahead and die cut the word I'm sorry using white cardstock. I cut the sentiment thrice, which will give me a beautiful dimension and make our sentiment pop. Don't forget to store those little dots over the eye. That is something I almost lose every time around my messy work area. Well, I adhered all of these pieces together using liquid glue. You could also use spray adhesives for such tiny little sentiment pieces or die cut the sentiments using cardstock stuck to adhesive sheets. But I like to use liquid glue because I feel that gives me a lot of control and even wiggle room to make sure that my sentiments are perfectly aligned over each other. Now, once I adhered all these layers together, I placed them back on my sticky mat and using the same ocean shade of the Simon System positively saturated inks, I ink blended on this die cut piece. I wanted to create an ombre effect, so I ink blended with a very heavy hand towards the bottom of the sentiment, and as I went up, I used very little pressure. Now, the sentiment matches perfectly with our flowers. Now, even though I mentioned that we are creating a very clean and simple card, well, we will definitely be adding some texture to this clean and simple look. I use the floral festoon embossing folder to add dimension and texture to our background panel. The intricate floral arrangement design on this embossing folder matched perfectly with the flowers on the exotic bloom wafer die, which is the focal point of our card. Now, whenever I'm embossing onto a background panel, I like to use a lightweight cardstock. Here I'm using the Nina 80 pound white cardstock, and I will lightly mist it with a spray of water to make sure that the paper does not crack when I run the sandwich through the die cutting machine. Now that all the components of our card is ready, it's time to assemble them together. I will first figure out the position of my sentiment and the focal point before adhering them onto the card front. Well, I did go ahead and cut a shadow layer for my sentiment using white cardstock. This is because I wanted to pop up the entire sentiment piece onto my card front using some foam tape. I first stuck my flowers using liquid glue on the upper left of this card panel, and then using some foam tape, I mounted the I'm sorry sentiment right below the floral focal point. I thought of adding some sequin mix onto this card front, but later decided to leave it as is and keep this card simple and not be distracted by any bling. Using some foam tape, I mounted the entire panel on top of an A2 size note card. I love that even with so much color and texture and dimension, this card looks absolutely clean and very simple, and it's easy to recreate in a bunch of different colors. And just like I did in my previous project where I created an Adore You card using the same floral focal point, you could use this design to create cards for multiple occasions. Here's a look at the finished card. I love how beautiful this turned out. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video as much as I did creating this card. All the supplies that I used in today's project will be linked down in the description box below. Note that all of these links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for stopping by. Until next time, stay safe.